Hello, Professor.
Hi, good afternoon. So I would like to make this presentation on this new ITU work item, which intends to be converted to a draft ITU recommendation on common user profile for personalizing audiovisual content. And we are working on it for a while now. And we do have good interest from EBU, BBC, and also NHK and our American counterparts. And the aim of this presentation is to first inform you about the development and more importantly to seek participation from Prasar Bharati or All India Radio on developing this draft recommendation. So myself, Pradipta Vishwas, I am presently an associate professor at Indian Institute of Science. And last week I was at the ITU headquarters at Geneva, and I have been elected vice chairman of the study group 9, which looks at cable and broadband TV. And before that, I am also co-chairing the inter-rapporteur group on audiovisual media accessibility. And around 2012-13, I was a vice chairman of a focus group on smart TV. And they do pre-standardization work on smart TV and accessibility of smart TV as well, and published one report on that. And I undertook my PhD from Cambridge University in 2010 from Trinity College, and worked with various industry and government institute as well, like DST, ISRO, and DRDO, etc. So first, let me introduce the context of this common user profile. So I grabbed this screenshot of a Doordarshan program from YouTube. And this program is meant to be an accessible program, although the subtitle was not exactly reflecting what has been uttered by the news person. Just 1 second, someone is waiting in the lobby. I will just let him in. Thanks. And I used YouTube's automatic subtitle feature, which you may see here, and it's kind of overlapped with the existing subtitle. And then what we noted that it also have the sign language interpreter for hard of hearing user. And YouTube itself by default offers a whole bunch of settings for adjusting the quality of subtitle. Although it may be questioned that how do an end user know that which is the best setting for him or her, or it will be very much dependent on the program in context. For example, in this case, we already have subtitle at the bottom, and anything appearing on top of that is occluding the earlier text generated by the TV producer. And if it is not carefully selected, the result will be bad subtitle. So although many countries' legislation now require that a minimum amount of production should have accessibility services, but if it is not appropriately designed, it doesn't serve its purpose. So here I just put screenshots of a few cases where the subtitle is not of good quality. In one case, it is saturating the screen. In another case, there is too much text to be read by the user. And in the other case, the contrast is too low to be legible. Now, of course, this common user profile is not about subtitles. So I am using subtitle just as an example. For which is most relevant for the broadcast TV program. But then with the modern advent of smart TV, hybrid TV, etc., we can do a much more with the traditional one-way viewing scenario of traditional TV. So around 2010 to 13, I worked on a project funded by EU FP7 program. And it aimed to develop a set-top box middleware to be deployed on a Technicolor set-top box. And this framework would support rendering web page or HTML5 on top of a broadcast TV program. So here on the screen, what you can see that the digital TV is being used as a video conferencing platform. And around 2010-11, there were discussion about Google TV, Apple TV, but those were not yet hit market. But now we have all these various smart TV and similar platform, which offers a lot more interaction than the traditional one-way interaction where something is broadcasted on the TV and the user interaction only limited to watching the TV program. So now users can participate in the TV program, and a few years ago we also published an ITU report on developing a taxonomy or participation. And more importantly, the difference among broadcast or cable TV, website, multimedia content, even the recent development of augmented, virtual, mixed reality content, these are getting blurred. So there are many guidelines from UN, like the most popular is UN CRPD. The ITU recently, ITU has a resolution called Resolution 70 on accessibility. And of course, in India, MITI has a guideline on making websites multimedia accessible. So it is not always scalable or possible for developing separate guidelines for websites, multimedia content, broadcast and cable TV, although presently the tradition is like that we have WCAG guideline for websites, we have separate guidelines for other multimedia content or education, then we have some guidelines for broadcast TV, but a more generic approach will be having a common platform through which we can personalize our audiovisual content instead of separately working on each individual media to make them accessible. So in that context, I was working on this common user profile format for a while now, and about 1 year ago, I think 1 or 2 years ago, if I remember, the ITU approved it as a new work program, and presently it is under study, that we are trying to develop a common user profile format for personalizing audiovisual media content. So what we mean by this common user profile? So the common user profile, it tries to develop or to define a set of variables, and it tries to hit a minimal set of variables that can be used to personalize maximum number of audiovisual media content, starting from the subtitles of broadcast or cable TV and moving on websites and other multimedia content. So it is not specifying that how we will make the media accessible or what will be the base settings, but it will create a standardized metadata format that different multimedia content can interpret. So earlier similar work has been started in 2010 under a EU initiative on a standardization committee known as Virtual User Modeling and Simulation, and it published a very big, more than 100 variable as a research paper and report. But due to the exhaustive list of variables, that was not well accepted. Then there are also a ISO standard, and which known as ADA, which also try to develop a user profile format for providing accessibility. But again, it has a similar issue that it is not widely adopted by many audiovisual content developers. And presently the question 11 in study group 9, which I am the recruiter, and question 26 of ITU study group 16, they are looking at the accessibility of multimedia content, and ITU is study group 6. They are responsible for production, and also the particular work program, they are also looking at the similar question. And very recently a similar effort has been taken in study group 2, I believe, as well. So many people, they felt the need of such a common user profile format. There are already existing some work on that both in the research domain and in standardization domain. But what is missing is a consensus among various stakeholders so that people can adopt that. And unless we have a consensus, so there will be limited success of the effort because it will not be adopted by many stakeholders. So our proposed approach is on the right side, you can see a list of variables. Of course, this is not the final list because presently we are discussing among the ITU circle, and also we are taking input from expert from ISO also, that defining a minimal set of variables. Why I'm telling minimal set? Because if the variable list is too exhaustive like the Holmes approach, many audiovisual content developer may find it's redundant to define too many variables. But at the same time, we have to ensure that we have a minimal set which can provide the most desirable accessibility services like subtitle, alternative text, and screen navigation facility by placing screen element appropriately. And these variables should be interpretable by various audiovisual media content rendering platforms, and the user will be able to define this variable through a user profile creation application. So let me further clarify this sequence of action. So let us start with the user, because end user is the main beneficiary of the whole approach. And the process starts with a user profile creation application where user is creating a profile. And this profile can be stored on personal device like smartphone, TV, computer, whatever. The user is most welcome to create multiple profile, like now we all have multiple profiles for our various social networking platforms. So similarly, the user can have a same profile or multiple profile across his choice of personal device. If the user prefers, although it is not mandatory, indicated by this dotted line, that this profile can be also stored in third-party or proprietary cloud services like Google, Apple TV, Microsoft Azure, Amazon, and so on and so forth. And then the main requirement of this common user profile format will be this green box, which is marked as interpreter for common user profile. So you can imagine that just like your username password, and it is interpretable by multiple applications, that this set of variables which we can have consensus with, that will be defined either on the personal device or a third-party cloud service. And this TV receiver, decoder, or website, or some middleware framework deployed on set-top box or the operating system of the computer, it can interpret this common user profile format, and the user profile will be stored either on personal device or proprietary third-party cloud service. And all these audiovisual content like the TV program, website, or any Android app, that can be personalized based on the user preference. So in the next slide, again, we textually utter this the sequence of action that the user will create a profile using profile creation application, and the implementation details that how this profile will be stored, the exact file structure, etc., encryption details, those will not be part of the recommendation. The recommendation only define the number of variables or the variables itself. If user like it, he may upload this profile to proprietary third-party cloud application, or it can be stored on personal devices. User can create multiple profiles as he or she wants, just like we create multiple profiles for various social networking platform. And there will be an interpretation application for the user profile which can read this profile and the values, and appropriately it can adapt user interface. And this understanding of variable will constitute the mandatory part of the resolution. And the TV receiver, decoder, website developer, they will be the responsible stakeholder who will developing this interpretation or understanding mechanism. So whenever we are talking about user profile or user details, so these security aspects become very important, because there are both Indian and as well as EU and USA and many other secure privacy respecting laws which doesn't allow to user details to be transmitted or shared. But so in this case, the format does not specify the physical or network media for storage. And the profile can be stored anonymously and it need not to be shared. Like for example, the profile can be stored only on the local device the user is using, on the TV or the set-top box. What is only required is this interpretation mechanism, that how the variables will be interpreted. That mechanism will only be implemented on by these third-party developers. So when we are talking about this implementation or interpretation, what do we mean? So there can be multiple ways by which it can be integrated, or the user profile can be integrated or can be used to personalize audiovisual media content. On the right side, I showed a very simple example we take from our earlier guide project, which is almost showing a one-to-one mechanism that based on the color blindness, we can change the color contrast. Based on the, if the user is blind, we can turn on the audio caption. So this is a very simple mapping, but this mapping of user ability and the interface personalization, that will not be specified by this recommendation, but it only require that there should be some sort of mapping. And this mapping can be implemented at the application level, that for example, there can be an Android app which is implementing this mapping. It can be implemented as a browser plugin, and that can be installed in browser, and websites can be adapted. It can be implemented at middleware level. So the set-top box framework, as we worked for our guide project, we have some experience on that, that the middleware running on the set-top box, it can has an interpretation mechanism. And finally, it can also be implemented at operating system level, just like new accessibility features are defined in Windows, iOS, or Android. It can be defined as a new accessibility feature. But exactly how it is integrated or how it will be implemented, that will not constitute the mandatory part of the recommendation. The recommendation only specify that a list of variable and the interpretation mechanism of the variables. But how it will be implemented, how the mapping will be done, that will be left for individual developers or application engineers. So these are some examples where we already used this similar concept for in our various project. We started with the guide project, and then we also worked with some IIT Delhi researchers, and also at we had some collaborators in Queen Mary. So in different cases, we here on the left hand side, I am showing example of a website personalized according to the user profile, and you can see the background and foreground color contrast, font size, those are changed. Right side, the similar thing has been done for an Android application. So these are showing the application level integration. And one more example of these common user profile format is it can be used for simulating user performance as well. So here we used one guide application or application developed for the digital TV framework for video conferencing, as I was previously shown. And we can develop systems by which we can show end users the effect of red-green color blindness, or common visual problems like glaucoma, how a person with glaucoma will view a particular screen, or how a person with a certain motor impairment can interact with the particular screen, etc. So beyond personalization, it can also be used for training designers to develop better accessible system. But again, it will not constitute a mandatory part of the recommendation, but it will be one of the possible use cases of the common user profile format. So finally, what will be the mandatory requirements? And of course, it is tentative because we are still discussing it among colleagues, that the mandatory requirement will be that it is required to define the set of variables which is specified in this recommendation. And it is required to let users change variables like font size, color contrast, subtitle size, etc. within a limit set by the device and application, so that the font is not too big that it is going outside the screen region. So that limit will be set by the device and application, and user can change it. And it is optionally required to have a user profile creation application. So again, the implementation details will be left to individual app developers, but we require that the user will can define this variable using an application. Next question is, who is required to comply to this mandatory requirement? So any stakeholder who is interpreting the metadata, like the application developers or set-top box software developer, accessibility service provider like the subtitle developer, operating system or web developer. And on the right side, I draw a value network diagram specifically for television, which shows the flow of development starting from production, TV channel, TV service, contribution, transmission, reception up to the end user. And in this value network diagram, the production of metadata and promos and the TV receiver and decoder and the accessibility services provider, they need to be concerned or relevant stakeholder for this common user profile format, who needs to implement or define these variables and interpretation mechanism to allow personalized content. Main challenges so far we faced is this user for privacy and conformance to privacy related legislations, acceptable variable nomenclature. So I am telling that background color. So what will be the name of this variable from a programming point of view? And do we have any agreement or standard on that? Apparently, we do not have such standard in ITU. They only define term, but not the variable nomenclature. So that we are still discussing with our colleagues who already worked at ISO. Diverse range of audiovisual media applications and devices, because it's we are making a very ambitious approach to have a common format for multiple media, starting from broadcast and cable TV to websites, games, and so on. So we are collaborating with the ITU study group 16 and also with colleagues from ISO, so that we can reach a consensus. But the success of the whole effort will be only be then when we can reach the consensus, and also define a minimal set of variables. Of course, each device or application can add on more variables, but we have to define a minimal set of variables which is relevant for most audiovisual media. Main expectation from today's meeting or presentation is first is support and participation in this drafting standard. So last week also I got some mail from EBU who took some interest in this common user profile format, and the ITU arranged one ad hoc drafting session on 1st April IST 5 to 6:30 in the evening. So it will be really great if some colleagues from Prasar Bharati or All India Radio can join this drafting session. I can share all the joining instruction. And I know that some colleagues from EBU or NHK, they will join. So I do require, it will be great if I can also have some Indian participations to make this thing relevant for the Indian context as well. Help in defining variables. So if you believe that some variables are missing or redefined, that will be really helpful. And of course, giving insight on possibility of implementation, because I myself do not work on the TV production. I am taking mostly help from my EBU and BBC colleagues, but some help from your side will be greatly appreciated. So this is the final conclusion, that we are our main aim to reduce the digital divide, which is championed by UNCRPD and also recently by this Digital India initiative, and personalizing system and services for people with diverse range of abilities. And of course, it will also be there are plenty of use cases which show that an accessible service or software is has good relevance for their able-bodied counterparts as well. Many examples like audiobooks, subtitles for foreign language speakers, and so on. And sharing personalizing information and metadata in secure and platform independent way, so that the user need not to adjust settings for multiple applications and device. And of course, finally, it will